This is Everyday Spirituality from Connect.Faith with Debbie Bronkema. And I'm here today with Kitty Ufford-Chase. Kitty and her husband, Rick, had been the co-directors up at Stony Point most recently. And now they've moved to northern Vermont, where Kitty has been discovering a new sense of call to be an environmental advocate. And we're talking to her about that today, but also her spiritual practices that helped her with discernment along the way. So I thought it would be great if you just started out by telling us a little bit about your journey in being a Quaker.
So I was raised Quaker. My dad was raised Quaker. My mom was raised Unitarian. I never saw her in a Unitarian church. I think they just felt from the beginning that it was important to be raised in one religious community. And so I was raised in Princeton, New Jersey at Stony Brook Friends meeting there in an old meeting house that was rebuilt, I think, in 1762. So I had a great sense of history growing up. That little building was there during the Battle of Princeton with George Washington and the British and all of that. And I have never wanted to be anything else. I've struggled with it. And for a long time, I said that I was Quaker in spite of my Quaker upbringing. But then I decided that wasn't very fair because there was a lot that I don't think I appreciated enough at the time that set me on a path that I've been on since. And so I say that I'm Quaker in every cell in my body. And that it is a relationship kind of like a marriage, where there's some struggle for better, for worse, rich or poor. You can't just walk away very easily. And there's just stuff about it that are so part of me and who I am that I can't imagine it being different. And don't want to, really. I'm not out looking for a whole nother faith.
I love the faith as a marriage, faith as a commitment at sort of a core level that you're talking about. I'm just wondering, what are the joy parts for you? What part of being Quaker feeds your spirit, fills you up?
I think the silence and the connection to the still small voice within, and feeling very comfortable with silence. I think that is such a countercultural to the extreme thing in our society where something has to be turned on all the time. And it's the one gift that I still hope to impart to my kids, is to be able to be comfortable in the silence. That has been one of the biggest gifts, and what comes spiritually through that. I think also for me, there's a mixed heritage, but there's still some bright lights in the heritage of Quaker women that have spoken to me over the years of their risk taking and the testimonies of Quakers. So there's some pretty significant ones. We're more well known for the peace testimony, but there's also a testimony of equality, a testimony of simplicity, testimony of community. Now people want to invite, have another one, the testimony of environmental stewardship and earth care and so on. But there's some ones that have just been there over the years, and they're not written down. There's not a, something in a handbook that says this is the testimony.
Yeah.
Right. It's a living thing in our lives. And so trying to testify to those particular values is important to me. And the continuing revelation, the fact that it's not, at least in my strand of Quakerism, there's not so much an emphasis on the Bible, that was, God was speaking through the Bible, and God is still speaking today. So that continuing revelation part, that it changes and it's available today.
I've heard people talk about Quakers in terms of discernment. Is that a piece of your journey with Quakerism? Or?
Yes. And in fact, Quakers have a wonderful tool that I think Parker Palmer has been using a lot with Courage and Renewal.
Mm.
in his work of working with teachers and others called the Clearness Committee.
Yeah.
And the,
Yeah.
yes, oh, I think we all should learn how to do it in high school. And it's pretty straightforward. It's a committee of people that either you pull together when you have something big to discern, or your Quaker meeting does that for you. And the idea is to listen with you to what you might be called to say or do or be, and to ask ever deepening questions. It
Mm.
has nothing to do with advice at all. It's really helping you to listen into new places of discovery in a spiritual sense and other sense. And the one place that often happens is in marriage. So there's a clearness committee if you ask to be married under the care of a Quaker meeting. So that always happens, but it can be done at any time for anything. And there have been times in my life that I have asked for that, and it's made all the difference.
Yeah.
And it doesn't even have to be Quakers on the committee, too. I want to say anybody can do it.
So it's just the listening and the willingness to go deeper and ask the questions. And yeah.
Yes, yes, and to allow time and to focus that this is about the person who's struggling with that discernment, and it's to really prayerfully hold them in the light, as we say, in the spirit, and pray for them, with them, and that opening up of going deeper and deeper.
So now you've been in this time of change in your life, and I'm wondering how discernment has been for you in this period.
Once the pandemic started and we had to temporarily shut down Stony Point Retreat and Conference Center and not have guest groups come, that was pretty dramatic. And we weren't able to, pivot and find a new way of doing things online, because what we loved to do at Stony Point Center was to bring people together at our campus. We did those two things the best. And so as the weeks and months progressed, and we realized this could mean major, major shifts, then Rick and I we're struggling with, well, what do we do? What might be in our future, and what's our relationship going forward? And I was the one that suggested to him, we need a clearness committee.
Oh,
So we actually had a clearness committee last summer of people that we just picked, that were just, we knew that they were deep listeners and that they understood us and our context. And it was a listening for us as co-directors of Stony Point Center of what might be our relationship, but also individually as we learned more and more, and as time went on, and what could be the future of Stony Point Center with or without us, and would we be part of it or not, and just all of those dilemmas and discernments. We were very fortunate to have, it was really just three people that got on Zoom with us as often as we needed to just talk through and to hear it. So there was that discernment, and then really that was ended up in sort of a decision that was made to lay everybody off at Stony Point Center and put it into hibernation. And I'm glad to say that it's starting to come out of hibernation
mm,
July 1st, although not with Rick and me there anymore.
okay.
And once we were laid off, we came to our cabin in the woods on the property of Rick's parents in northern Vermont. And so then there was a whole nother discernment process starting once we arrived. And that ended up being, I think the only thing we really had was that we knew we wanted to find future work in northern New England, because we have family in northern New England and we didn't want to be far away. That was all we came with. And
Okay.
whether we would do something together or separately was not at all clear.
So there's a
So
lot of trust the process in the journey of. we know this one thing, so we're going to go forward from there. It sounds,
Yes,
yeah.
yes, that was what we had. And Rick was already working part-time for Johnson C. Smith Seminary. And so he sort of had that going. And I knew that thanks to a generous severance package that I didn't have to go out and look for work immediately. And I thought, wow, if I could do something over, I would want to do more on the environment and earth care. And now I have this chance to do it over, and I'm in hibernation, and I have sort of an internet in this little cabin. And so it really was just following my passions and what really spoke to me. And I think for me, the next 15 years feels like an all hands on deck kind of situation in terms of trying to save our planet, save the planet that we call home, that we're a part of. And so I thought, I have not been an environmental activist or an advocate my whole life, my whole career. What do I do? How can I be a part of it? And it was really a lot of being open for what might come, but also seeking at the same time, right? So it's a pursuing and a receiving at the same time.
Right.
So
So, so you found some places to learn? Was that how you started then?
yes, and I just found them on the internet.
Okay.
Just sort of looking around. And the first one I found was an organization called Climate Interactive that has a lot of simulation tools that help people simulate various climate solutions to climate change. And it was going to be a very complicated training for 8 hours. And I thought, oh no, this is way too much for me. And then I remembered a Quaker woman friend of mine who was actually doing much more in the environment than I was. And I called her up and she said, oh yes, I know about that. And I've never had the time or wanted to do that training by myself. And I said, well, what if you had a buddy? And
Uh-huh.
so we ended up being buddies and doing that training together. And it was, well, the training itself was about 10 days worth of videos and stuff, but we worked on it more than that. And we took our time and we worked it together. So I really felt like I never would have embarked on that, not having much experience with the issues really. But to have a buddy, all of a sudden it just flipped and sort of opened. Quakers have lots of different mantras, and a beautiful one is way opening. And it really felt like way opened then to be trained on how to use those simulator models with groups.
Yeah. So you found a partner for that journey. That's really
Yes,
great. Yeah.
yes, that's exactly it. Is I hadn't been in touch with her for quite a while, and she lives in Arizona.
Okay.
But I just thought, oh, I could call her and ask her what she thinks of this model.
That's great. So now, since then, how have you been growing that piece of yourself?
I think part of growing that particular piece up here in the woods in Vermont, being here, was also working on the grief,
Mm,
right? The loss of all that we had planned, and we're hoping for the future for 2020 and beyond at Stony Point Center and all the visions we had. And
yeah.
so that was another reason why it was a real luxury not to have to go look for something else immediately. That was just such yeah, a
Let
gift.
yourself heal from this this
Yes,
unexpected pandemic that nobody could have predicted was going to
I know
turn
that,
all your plans upside down. Yeah.
right. And we know we weren't the only ones, that so many people have had to deal with such loss. And um, I kept wanting for some guide about how do you heal from grief.
Mm,
What's the 1, 2, 3 step? Okay, then I'm healed.
yeah.
And it didn't happen. And I couldn't find anybody who was saying, well, this is how you do grief. This is how you mourn. Um,
Somebody that
but
I knew told me the only way through it is through it. I told
Yes.
her, "Are you sure?" But that was the answer that I heard, and I think that's true. There's no shortcuts and there's no going around it. It's just going through it. That's hard.
Right. And I think I have a I guess a spiritual accompanist, a spiritual director, but who's another older Quaker woman friend. And she said the important part is to have leave space for it,
Mm,
because you can't control it. You never know when it's going to bubble up
yeah.
and what's going to trigger it and what it's going to feel like. But when that does happen, is to somehow be able to have the space to to feel it,
Mm,
to feel it and not suppress it and close it and think, oh no, I'm in the middle of the grocery store conversation. I can't show tears, and to say, no, no, that's what I need now, and to create
that's
that
how you,
space and make it okay.
yeah. Oh, that sounds like you've tried to do
Mm.
this in a really healthy way.
So,
It's hard,
yeah,
but good. Good.
yeah. After a few months, about March, I guess I started looking on for jobs. And the first one that I saw was wonderful because it was a job that I could do, even though I wasn't, an environmental scientist or anything like that. It was working with a Sustainable Energy Association, putting on conferences. And it was
Okay.
so
Really?
exciting to see something in that field that used the skills that I had that I could do. And I was so thrilled. And I wrote the cover letter and I wrote the resume, and I didn't even get an interview.
Oh,
And I was crushed for a couple of days. And then I thought, well, what's wonderful about it is that if one job pops up that I actually think I could do with my skills, then there will be another one, right? That hope, my hope and my, yeah, maybe calling or leading, just a real desire to serve the earth in
mm,
some way, is not misplaced. That
yes.
there is something out there for me.
Mm,
So that was reassuring, and at the same time disappointing at the same time.
right. Right.
So, but here I walk out my back door and there are trails in the woods. And so being able to do that with our dog on a regular basis, I got snowshoes. I've never had snowshoes. And the great thing about snowshoes is you can go anywhere. You don't have to stay on the path.
Oh,
And when you decide you're done, you can just retrace your steps in the snow, right? So you can't really get
very good.
lost in the woods. I hadn't really thought of it that way. And one of my spiritual practices that I brought from Stony Point Center, that I would walk the dog at Stony Point Center, but I had put on little laminated cards all the words to the hymns that I've always wanted to know by heart.
Okay.
And then I would walk the dog and I would sing out loud. That took a while, and
Hmm.
I'm not quite sure why I started that, but I know the dog's ears were always listening for me to sing. I wouldn't sing real loud, but I would sing and learn those verses, because that's for me is we don't have set creeds and set prayers and things in Quakerism. And so some of my favorite hymns were those prayers.
Prayers.
And I hated when I would know everything, but I couldn't remember the last word or something. So this was a way that I could sing, and it was my morning prayers as well.
It sounds
So
like a real attempt at healing, you know? To,
yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. And we had an old dog at that time at Stony Point Center. So she would walk very slowly. And I had to make a spiritual decision that I was not going to hurry her, that I was not, that was a real discipline of, no, I'm going to walk with her at her pace. And this is going to be a time for her and a time for me. And once I did that, then I stopped being frustrated with her and just
Yep, it's
created
not about
whatever it
your
took.
exercise. We have an old dog too, and I know what
Yeah.
exactly what you mean. At that point,
Yes.
it's no longer about your exercise. It's about giving them something they enjoy. So,
Right. And then you enjoy it because you know they're enjoying it
yes.
too. Yes.
So
Exactly.
now you've been doing some of these workshops, I know. So how did that start?
Mm. Well, once I did that training, then I just started putting out emails to my friends and family and said, hey, I need to do at least 10 pilot, I was calling it just for the foreseeable future, they're pilot workshops. I'm going to try and learn how to be a facilitator. Would you mind helping me get better at this? And so it was kind of fun because we could do it on Zoom, and I had different people from all different parts of my life because I just sort of invited anybody I could think of. And I think what's wonderful about the simulation tools is that they are tools for conversation. They are real tools for conversation when it's not something that people just bring up casually at picnics and after church. So, what do you think about climate change? Do you think we're going to be able to save our planet? You
Yeah,
know, that just doesn't
a little
come
big picture. Yeah.
it's kind of awkward. It's awkward. And so having this engaging tool that everybody you can play around with and try out different things, you know, it's not a lecture or a PowerPoint slides. It's come tell me, you know, what do you think would happen if we were able to stop new coal plants from being constructed? You know, new coal mines. What would happen? And let's try it out and let's see. So even though I started the first one thinking I had to know everything and had all my note cards all over the place, I have since realized that no, it's about the conversation and it's about getting started and helping people get started, because I think there are lots of different responses, but at least my response so often is paralysis. Like, oh my gosh, it's too much. It's too much. It's too depressing.
Yeah.
And so just kind of shut down. And so I feel like this tool has helped me not to shut down and to encourage others not to shut down either, and say, no, there are ways. There are still ways that we
Can make some change.
can
I
make
think.
it, yes, yes, and make it not so bad. I mean, we're already experiencing it,
Mhm.
but there's still lots we can do. So it can be a
Uh,
hopeful thing.
yeah, it sounds like this journey has led you to kind of a way to spread some hope about a difficult subject, which is that's pretty
Yeah.
great. Yeah.
Yes, because it's spiritual. You know, we already know all the facts, right? And we know what's out there. We don't need more facts.
Yeah.
It's a spiritual crisis that we as humanity have never had before. Really, truly.
Mm.
What have we done? What have we done?
So getting ourselves to ask those questions and then look at possibilities, that seems like a really healthy way to open the conversation for people and
Yeah.
give us both our sense of responsibility and some hope. Yeah.
Yes. Another thing that I've done is I've just been listening and reading a lot about Joanne Macey, the work that reconnects. I don't know if you've heard of her at all,
Mm.
but she's 92 now. And so I attended some seminars back in January, February, and March that she was doing. And she really has been focusing on this particular planet health and the earth for a number of decades. And her background is more Buddhism,
Okay.
but it's still um, how do we not get stuck in the guilt or the shame or the paralysis?
Right.
And so she talks about start with gratitude, honor the pain, look with new eyes, and go forth.
Mm.
And yes, because it is a spiritual question, and she's known that for a long time, So, and she does a lot of ritual, which actually for a Quaker is a little unusual because Quakers, kind of tossed most of that out in some
Right.
ways at the beginning, right? We tossed out baptism and some of the other sacraments because we felt people were just doing them by rote. This was way back in the 1600s when it started. So me working with ritual now feels a little funny,
Right.
um, but I think it can get to the heart and the spirit of this, because that's what's going to move, and that's how we're going to connect with each other and figure out our real place in this web. This is a web of life. This is not a pyramid with the most powerful on top and everybody down here. We need that kind of a paradigm shift where we recognize that we're part of the web.
That's
With
great.
that.
That's really great. I appreciate you talking about this. So, Kitty, how are things going now with the job market? How are you finding that whole experience at this point?
So I was really fortunate that the next opportunity that came up from Indeed that was related to the environment, that I could see myself doing, they saw it as well. And so actually this week I have started at Sterling College, which is a small 4-year undergraduate, tiny, tiny little college in northern Vermont, way up here where I am, whose majors, they only have 4 majors: ecology, environmental humanities, sustainable agriculture and food systems, and outdoor leadership and education. And I started this week as assistant dean of student life. And they put a
Amazing.
great focus on building community in such a small place, and how do we live ecologically better in the world today. I feel like I am able to bring my skills to something that's going to hopefully nurture some of the next folks that are going to help us um, heal our planet, heal our planet for the 7 generations to come. So I feel really fortunate that it's only 30 minutes away, and that it's about building community and staying connected to nature and the earth.
That's amazing. That sounds like a really good fit for where you've been and where you are now. That's
Yeah.
wonderful, and I
Yep.
can definitely see you working with young adults in a really healthy
Mm-hmm.
way. That's amazing. I'm glad to hear that.
Yeah.
Really
Thank you.
glad. So I know that we're really interested at Connect Faith in the program that you've been talking about. In fact, we're planning a workshop at a date to be announced. We'll let people know when that's going to be, because we want to learn more about this model that you've been telling us about. And I have a feeling that there might be other people that feel that way too. So I wondered if there's a way that they could get in touch with you if they want to know more about this.
Yes, of course. So my email is my name, Kitty Ufford-Chase, but no hyphen, all one word. So Kitty Ufford-Chase at gmail.com.
Okay.
And I'd be happy to answer any questions and connect up for anything. And I'm really looking forward to doing the workshop with you all.
It'll be
So
really
we'll get that going as soon as we can.
great. What do you call it? Do you call the workshops sustainability?
We call it actually Climate Action Workshop. And
Climate action workshops? Okay.
yeah,
Wonderful. Wonderful. Well, it's been really great catching up with you. Thank you so much for joining us today. This has been Everyday Spirituality with Connect Faith, and you can find us wherever you find podcasts. If you have a friend that you think would like to know about it, please feel free to share.